Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the For a Better Web podcast, in which I, Bruce Lawson, Technical Communications Officer from Vivaldi, ruthlessly interrogate somebody who, in their own way, in their own communities, is fighting for a better web. And today it's my absolute pleasure to be joined by Evan Prodromo, who is the research director of the Social Web Foundation. But before we get into that, Evan, thank you for joining us. Could you briefly explain to listeners who might be not familiar with the term what we mean by the social web?
Yeah, I think it's a fairly simple concept, right? We're all used to the idea of a world wide web of documents and applications that we can all reach. They're all connected using links, using open standards, and that rich and multipolar fabric of different websites across the world presents us with a lot of choice and opportunity. The idea of the social web kind of takes that World Wide Web idea and applies it to social networks. Most of us have accounts on some social network like a Facebook or a Snap or a LinkedIn. And the rules of those social networks are that you can only connect to people who already have an account on that social network, which keeps us constrained in those social networks, restricts what we can do. The idea of the social web is that you can reach beyond the limits of that social network out into the rest of the world, so that someone on Flipboard can follow someone on Facebook Threads, or somebody on Mastodon server can follow somebody on WordPress. So it allows us to go across boundaries and make connections with the rest of the world.
So it's, if you like, a network of networks, much like the World Wide Web that we know and love. And presumably there is an equivalent of HTTP or TCP/IP, an open standard that will allow these social networks to federate. ActivityPub, is it called?
That is exactly what it's called. So ActivityPub is the open standard that lets different social networks share data across across the network boundaries. So we get that kind of social internet or social web. ActivityPub is based on HTTP, so it uses the same underlying framework, but it's used to share activities, things that you do on the social networks. So when you share an image or post a note, your status, or even longer text, posting a video, etc., that all goes across the network, across ActivityPub. But we call it ActivityPub because it's not just about that content. It's also about social interactions, how we follow people, how we send direct messages, how we can comment or like or share things. All of those activities are represented in ActivityPub, and that means that we can use them across networks. So it's not just about syndicating content, it's about having real social interactions.
Right. So it's a it's a transport or a mechanism to alert the social web, the Fediverse, whatever you want to call it. It's not just here's something I said, it's here's a thing I did. I followed somebody,
Yeah.
I blocked somebody, I shared an image, I retweeted, reboosted, whatever the nomenclature is. It's got you wrote this, didn't you? Or you're one of the people behind ActivityPub.
I'm one of the 5 authors. So, and I'm the last listed one. So I try to keep humble here. Yes, so we have 5 people who worked on the document itself, but it's really a collective effort. The W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, which is the standards body that sets standards for the World Wide Web, roughly. They, in 2015, decided to start this process of creating a social web working group and creating social web standards. So it was a group of different companies, individual researchers, putting together this standard. So I was one of the people who wrote it, but we didn't necessarily design it from scratch. It was a
Mhm.
collective effort, right? And that often happens in standards world, right? We have to do a lot of push and pull back and forth, a lot of voices, a lot of hands on the ball.
Yeah, I mean, my name is somewhere on the HTML5 stroke living standard, but amongst hundreds of names. But that's the strength of the web, or the open standards and open data, I think, is that
Right.
they have to include as many different diverse voices, and that makes the end result stronger, even if it's slower to actually reach a consensus, because there's more voices. You get a better end result, in my opinion. But
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like, there's the old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to
hmm
go far, go together. Right.
hmm hmm
That's how standards work, is that we all have to come together. We work out the standard. And by the time it's actually released, we have a whole bunch of stakeholders, whole bunch of implementers who are ready to go forward with the implementation. So it makes it a stronger system.
I mean, you're preaching to the converted here, because I've been in standards forever. But ActivityPub is done through the aegis of W3C. It's finished. It's
Mhm.
a standard or a candidate rec or whatever the nomenclature is. But it's there. People are implementing it. I'm a big Mastodon user. Um,
Fantastic.
but it strikes me that whereas this is a great thing for open, people like me who believe their words of wisdom should be read far and wide, um isn't there an inherent tension here with the people who run the big social networks that like to keep you on their platform? Did you have much pushback from established social networks, or did they engage and embrace it? I don't mean embrace in the Microsoft way. I mean genuinely embrace it.
Look, it's a difficult thing for companies who have run for decades now with these isolated social networks to get them connected, and it isn't an easy choice. I think the conventional wisdom in social software has been that your network is one of your primary assets, and really giving anyone else access to that network is a big no-no. But I think that idea is changing. In some ways, it makes I have a rule of thumb that where I say that networks join an internetwork that is bigger than the network itself. So
Mhm.
if you have a network of 100 people, it really makes sense to join a network of 1,000 people, because you get access to more audience for your great words of wisdom. You get more content, interesting things to read. And then, that 1,000 person network might join a 10,000 person network because it's bigger and bigger. So I think that as we grow this social web or Fediverse, we will see more and bigger networks joining up.
Cool.
It really has started, and the core of the network has been with open source social network enthusiasts, Mastodon users, etc. But over the last couple of years, we've seen an embrace, possibly in the Microsoft sense, but also in the other sense, from commercial social networks. So Automatic has implemented ActivityPub. Oh, there goes my little thumb. Automatic has implemented ActivityPub for all WordPress.com blogs. They are working on bringing it out for Tumblr. Ghost, which is a newsletter service,
Mhm.
is implementing ActivityPub, has started the process. Famously, Flipboard and Threads, which is the big meta service. So I think that covers some of my main ones. I try to be careful to make sure I give focus to all of them. But this large kind of coalition has kind of crossed over from that independent open source enthusiast into like a wider commercial space.
Which is just how the web started, really. I mean,
exactly.
it was. I mean, I discovered it in '99 when it was already creeping out from weird hobbyists. But if you wound it back 3 or 4 years before that, it would have been weird hackers, in the Hollywood sense. And now, every company's on the web. Every company's involved in the standardization of it.
I think for old timers like me, there was an experience in the early 90s where the way that you connected to other people was using dial-up online services. So in the US, we had AOL, CompuServe, similar systems, and they had the same kind of mechanism. You could only read documents that were in the AOL universe. You could only send messages to other AOL users. And over the course of like about 18 months, the first one started implementing internet email and web access. And then it became a competitive advantage. They couldn't really continue without having these features. And it really blew up and, opened up email, the web, et cetera. And my hope is that as we see this kind of snowball effect happening, we'll see more social networks kind of approaching this place. And it really does make sense for a lot of companies and organizations to get engaged with this social web, because social networks are such an important part of business, a part of our lives, a part of the way that we work, that it's like, it really is something that we need to be engaging fully in this internetwork experience.
I completely agree. And we've mentioned the parallels with the World Wide Web origin. So this is a chance for me to give full disclosure to our viewers and listeners that the Social Web Foundation was launched comparatively recently, I think a month ago. And Vivaldi, for whom I work, was one of the launch supporters. In fact, our CEO, Jon von Techner, explicitly drew the parallel at the launch that this reminds us of the early days of the World Wide Web breaking out of silos. But I do need for our viewers and listeners to understand that Vivaldi and the Social Web Foundation have, a new, but we do have a relationship that I really push. I really push for transparency here, so that's me being transparent. But can you tell us then what the Social Web Foundation is going to do, why you set it up?
Yeah, so the Social Web Foundation started about a month ago, but we've been working on it for a few months. And it is me, my two co-founders, Mallory Knodell, who has a background in digital rights advocacy, equity in digital spaces, and my other co-founder, Tom Coates, who has a big background in developing digital products. So formerly at the BBC, was at Yahoo for the Brick House project, and then has led a number of startups. He's really a wonderful guy. We're bringing together, that idea of digital rights from Mallory, this idea of like digital products from Tom, and then I'm coming with the standards, and we're really hoping to have an effect on the social web as a whole. Because the social web is kind of picking up this momentum. It's really exciting to see what's happening, but we want to clear the way for different kinds of organizations to get involved. So, for example, we want to do outreach to media organizations who are thinking about publishing on the social web, give them a playbook so they know how to get started, and they can advocate, advocates within the organization can advocate for social web use at the org. Or universities, enterprises that want to set up their own nodes on the social web, give them the information they need, the case studies, kind of like pave the path for them. We are so we've got a projects list that's like a mile long, but our biggest goal is a bigger, better social web. We want to see more people involved, and we want to see a richer, more healthy, more fulfilling experience for the people that are there. Yeah.
No, it's really interesting. You say the word healthy,
Yes.
and the triumvirate that are heading up Social Web Foundation. You, a product person, and a human rights person. So you've got standards, product, which is always useful, and human rights. It's come to my attention that one of the very big social networks that I absolutely loved is diminished somewhat in its advocacy for online safety and human rights and general just a healthy place to have a discourse. I don't go there anymore. I open it up and it makes me anxious because of all the horrific stuff. So can you speak a little bit about, to me, the fascinating nexus between the tech and the equity, the human rights, the stuff that Mallory, if she were here, would be speaking about, but
all right, I'll try to channel this, right?
Thank you.
So today in 2024, social networks are not a kind of side part of our lives that we occasionally go to have a little fun and see some funny memes or videos, right? They are the way that we stay connected to the people that matter most to us, right? Our family, our friends. This is it is not a like optional part of sociality in 2024. It's a very central way that we stay in contact with our friends and family. It's also a way that political groups organize, people who are interested in gardening or in ecological issues, right, get together. It is the way that we do a lot of our civil society, as well as that personal private connections. And for those reasons, it's very important that we don't have single gatekeepers that are able to say, oh, this is acceptable discourse, this is not. We need to have the kind of realistic choice where you can say, hey, I want to connect and share my vacation photos that include pictures of my kids that I don't like to share publicly. I need to be able to set the privacy controls exactly right, so it goes to my family and friends and not to people that I don't know. And I might not be able to find the defaults that I need on some particular network. By being able to stay connected to people, but set my own rules for how the system works, that gives me the chance to set my own privacy decisions. And that, I give a very personal example, but that kind of rights issue comes on civil society, political, religious issues, all of these things. We need to be able to set our own standards on privacy, on who we talk to, on what's allowed to be spoken about, and not leave that up to like just one big organization that's trying to make a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah, that's basically civil rights and digital rights are. The Venn diagram is pretty much a circle because so much of our life is online. And again, it's not just talking to your mom on Facebook like I do. I was talking to my kids who are adults now about how we would organize anti-nuclear protests in the days before the internet, when we Xeroxing pieces of paper and dropping them off in punk record shops when you went to a demo and asking other people to Xerox them. And so much of civil society is done on the internet that it's really dangerous, I think, personally, for any organization or mad billionaire, oops, did I say that, to be able to control it. And something else I've been reading recently is about how often, because the big tech behemoths are in the USA and in California,
Right.
there seems to be a creeping Californiization of what's acceptable, etc. So I'm interested because I've lived all around the world. I was reading somewhere recently about a group of indigenous people in Central or South America, and they were thrown off a social network because their indigenous clothing was considered to be unacceptable to arguably quite puritanical Californians, and it was their damn clothing. My daughter, she's a tattoo artist, and she was thrown off showing a picture of she'd done a tattoo on somebody's mastectomy scars, and that was considered beyond the pale for some rather shrinking violet in California. I feel very deeply that to perpetuate and continue with the diversity of world culture, we need a diversity of discourse and social networks. Sorry, this is your soapbox, not mine.
That's okay. But these are questions that humanity has like wrestled with since like we started speaking and understanding each other, and I don't think it's fair for one product manager or a small group in a conference room in Silicon Valley to say like, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. It's also not fair to put that responsibility on them, right? Like they don't have to adjudicate acceptable discourse in civil society, right? We need to be able to use the power of choice to be able to find the platforms that work for us, right? And that's what a social web does. It lets us move around. It lets us find the platform that works for us. The other thing, talking about platform choice, is that there's business choice too, right? All of our social networks, not all entirely, but most of our social networks are driven entirely by advertising support, which is, a valid business model that exists on the web. You can argue with it if you don't like it, but it is one that definitely exists. But it's very hard to find social networks that have any other business model. And if you want to have a business model where, say, you pay a monthly subscription and you get to use the service, that's not possible if the platform you have has a specific business model. But by being able to choose your platform and still stay connected to the people that matter to you, we get to enable some really interesting business options, right? So you have SaaS hosting for the Fediverse, or you have advertising supported, or you have volunteer systems, or you get your social networking from your university, just like you get email or a web space, right? So we have so many different ways that we can support sociality that don't have to fit into a particular business model, which has been also a bit of a problem in the past.
It's something that we at Vivaldi wrestle with as well. Advertising is, there's been advertising on radio and then television and cinema since those things were invented. Where, we're not in the business of fixing capitalism. I'll leave that for next month's to-do list. We have to work in the world that we're in. But it frees up business models or business models yet to be explored.
I'm definitely a big fan of competition, of open markets, right? Yeah. And that's what open standards allow, is that people can choose the platform that makes sense to them, engage with it in the way. And we all know, right? Like the number one promise of market systems is that all players become better. They have to provide us better services, or else we go to a competitor, right? So that's the that's the real advantage of having that kind of choice, is that we can say, hey, I want to try something else. I want to try something new. If you want to keep me, improve your privacy, make this give me more features, give me more storage, right? Like, I'm shopping around. I'm not just stuck here because I can't get out.
Yeah. So it stops lock-in, or
Yeah.
or at least diminishes lock-in, so that you're locked in because the platform that you happen to be on offers you personally the best mix of features. And if it doesn't, you can go and presumably take your address with you, or
Well, here's what you can do: is you can move between addresses. So if you have an account on, say, Mastodon Social, and you have decided that you want to move to Vivaldi Net because you like the service there, you initiate a move from Bruce at Mastodon to Bruce at Vivaldi, and all of your followers will come with you. So you keep that. Keep all those social connections, right? So for the people who follow you, it's like absolutely transparent. It just like one day they wake up and you're just, you're posting from a new address and they're like, all right, looks good. We are working now. So you mentioned like the fact that ActivityPub is an established standard, which is the case, but it's also extensible, which means that we can build new parts to it, and existing software will keep working even though there's new features. So one of the things that we're working on at the W3C right now is a mechanism to bring all your content with you too, right? So everything you've posted, all your images and your videos, and that way this data portability becomes much more meaningful, right? So you're not only bringing your social network, your social connections with you, you're bringing all your content with you too.
That is cool. I'm going to have to read that spec. It's been a while since I've read a W3C spec, actually, and
it's got a good name. It's called Lola. We're really lucky. The CTO of the data transfer initiative, named Lisa Dussault, who also worked on calendar interoperability at CalDAV, is helping us make this new data portability process at the W3C for ActivityPub too. So, and that's one of the cool things about working in open standards, is you get these kind of rock stars that in the standards world that you get to work with because they are just as involved as we are.
Yeah, and of course, they've worked on something like this in another standard and can bring a ton of expertise that maybe you didn't. There's so much you don't know when you go into standardizing something, and then somebody goes, yeah, what about right to left, or what about vertical text? And you go, oh, that's a thing. And then once you realize it's a thing, it becomes super important, and you're so glad that there's somebody out there who knows about it, has engaged with the standards, knows how to make this stuff happen. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, there's different. One of the things that's really interesting about social software is that people are creating like new ways to interact all the time, right? Like, I want to interact with a random person. I want to interact in physical space with a group of people. So I'd like to invite people to come to this space. And one nice thing about having an extensible standard is that we can let developers, entrepreneurs, founders experiment with those different kinds of interactions, and they can use the network that actually exists that has tens of millions of people on it already.
Now, it sounds to me, when you're talking about data portability, you're talking about promoting competition, potentially stimulating new business models. It sounds to me like, in the best way, this sounds to me like a spiel that would go down very well with governments and regulators and people like that. Are you planning to, or are you engaging with anyone like that? I'm a hardened, seasoned veteran of regulators, so if you want any tips, come to me. But it strikes me that stuff could be music to their ears, particularly in the EU, which I'm not in anymore, unfortunately.
Oh, unfortunately for you, sorry about that. But yeah, I think our intention at the Social Web Foundation is that for policymakers, regulators, et cetera, that we can provide the information that they need to make those choices, and in order to support those decisions, right? So I think one of the things that happens in um, areas where there's a dominant player that is benefiting from network effects is that they say, hey, we can't interoperate with anyone else, right? Everybody has a choice to go somewhere else, but we don't interoperate with those. And by defining standards, we make that interoperation possible, and it allows regulators to start demanding that interoperability. So I think that we're really enthusiastic about that. We think it's fine to ask from dominant players. We hope that dominant players get ahead of the game and start thinking about implementing open standards before regulators decide that they need to do it. Yeah.
Which leads me to the Zuckerberg elephant in the room, because one of the other launch partners of Social Web Foundation has been Meta, of course, the organization most notably behind Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. I'm personally, and you didn't ask my opinion, but whatever, I'm going to give it. Personally, I'm always ambivalent when a big org comes on board with something like this, because it's great. They've got money. They have teams of people who can help with press and getting the name out. But I'm always not suspicious, because I'm not a suspicious man, but there's always a little bit of me thinks, what's their game plan? I mean, obviously you've got a relationship with Meta, and I don't want you to give away any secrets, but why are Meta so enthusiastic?
So first of all, I'm going to say that we do have a good relationship with Meta. We've tried to engage them with the rest of the social web, and I think it's been a really positive aspect. For me, I think from my point of view, it is a great attraction to other social networks to see that Meta's involved, right? I think it becomes much more accessible for I don't want to name any names because I don't want to put any pressure on them, but big networks with 100 million people, 1 billion people, to see that Meta has come in, they're like, oh, maybe this is something that could work for us, right? It's also something where even smaller networks, I talk about small networks like tens of millions of people, for them to be able to say, hey, we would have access to this audience. Facebook Meta Threads is 200 million people now. We have access to this audience. We can interact with them. Our creators on our service can broadcast to people on this service, right? So it's a really attractive possibility for the social web, and we think it's going to be a great way to kind of get that snowball effect keep going. Meta does not share business plans with me. Research director of external nonprofit foundation. But I can tell you what they have told me, which is that they think that this is the way that the social web is going, and that social networks are going, that they will be interconnected, and that they want to be leading that process, not be dragged into it, right? So I think that you've talked a little bit about regulators, right? And this is me taking off my friend of Meta hat and putting on my friend of the social web hat, which is, I think that when we start talking about regulating large digital platforms, having open standards that they're able to implement and to connect to the rest of the world is a big advantage, right? And so it's a lot better for them to be in that space early rather than, fight a long lawsuit to get dragged into it, right? So I think that that's one thing. I can't imagine that regulators don't play another part. I would also say that the other big issue is competition in this space, right? Like there are a lot of other social networks that are around, and if Meta is able to engage with some of the smaller social networks or even some of the bigger ones, they provide a kind of unified block that makes it harder for some of the other ones to compete, right? So it has some competitive advantage to participate in an internetwork, right? Like you go from a very big audience to a bigger audience, right? But you also get the benefit of like developer environments, all kinds of like participation and innovation that happens in that network, and it has a benefit even for a huge company like Meta. Now, if you had told me 3 years ago, like Meta is going to be one of the first big companies to jump on board with open standards for social networking, I would have laughed. I'm very glad we have them. I hope that, say by this time next year, I'm talking to you about 2 or 3 big tech companies rather than just one.
Interesting, though. I mean, I think you're right. My experience before Vivaldi with open web advocacy in the EU is that regulators see walled gardens as a more compelling target than companies that are doing a bit of lock-in, but primarily are based on open standards. So there is, as you say, there's, nobody wants a regulator sniffing around them. If only because it sucks time and press goodwill. So yeah, if they do engage and they're engaging in a positive way, that's obviously going to be a net win, I think. And also,
my, I think one of my personal goals, and this is just between you and me, right? We're not recording this or anything, are we?
No.
So one of my personal goals is to see other big companies get off the bench and get involved, right? So I would love to see. I won't name names again, but you can imagine big browser makers or mobile operating system providers who give you an email address, a calendar, a place to store your files, right? They've already got these cloud-based systems for doing a lot of managing of your life and interaction, to extend that with a social network structure. Much the way that Vivaldi has, right? So like seeing other operating system providers, browser providers, et cetera, say, hey, we already gave you an email address, let's give you a social networks space instead. So I think that is a case where we could really see that kind of thing snowballing.
And that would be cool from a consumer perspective, because excuse me, I joined Mastodon a long time ago, but didn't really use it because Twitter hadn't turned into what it's turned into now. And I'm quite techie. I'm not as techie as people think, but I'm reasonably techie. And I found it a little confusing to get my head around the federated nature of it. And I think, if for example, a large company that offers all those email address and calendars, etc., just gave you that address, and then the federation was all merrily happening, but you didn't have to think about it in the same way as, nobody thinks about how email works when Bob at Gmail emails Alice at Hotmail. It just works. That would
It
be
just
great.
works. And we've gotten used to the idea, from the very beginning, that that's the way email works, is that we send emails from my .edu address to your Hotmail address to a Gmail address, and it just constantly works. And that is the promise of the social web, is that we can have that same kind of interactivity and interconnectivity without, worrying about those boundaries at domain levels. Yeah. So I think, but I do want to address the question that came up that you had
Please.
about Mastodon, right? Which is not an unusual experience, right? We're all used to some of the affordances that are built into centralized networks, where they say promote people for us to follow, or there's a search mechanism so you can find people that you know. Maybe there's a way to take your contacts from your address book and say, show me, their accounts on this service for anyone I know. So we have all these all this work that's gone into these platforms to make them easier to use, more sticky for you, more interesting. And we haven't done that as much on the social web, especially among those open source systems like Mastodon. And one of the things that we want to do at the Social Web Foundation is to make those kinds of services that can work across the entire network, right? So being able to say, hey, I've just set up a new Mastodon account. Where are my friends? Because I want to follow them. That's a really important part about onboarding to any system. And it's not really well addressed yet. So we'd like to see that happen. That's the kind of thing that we'll be working on in terms of tools that we'll build.
I was going to ask that. When you say that's not really addressed, is that not addressed in the underlying protocols and standard in ActivityPub, or is that already there in the standard, but nobody's yet implemented it? What layer is the blockage?
That's a super good question. So we have things like associating an account with your name and your bio and things that you're interested in. What we don't have is the connection between, say, your email address and that account, right? And so, but it would be perfectly nice to be able to go to a search system and say, I have Bruce's email address. Can you show me his Mastodon account? Because I want to follow him. And so using your contact list to find people on the Fediverse. Obviously, very important that we include consent, that it's an opt-in system, that it is something that, if we withdraw consent, it doesn't it doesn't last forever. So we want to be very careful about it so that it supports people's expectations of privacy. At the same time, being able to find out how many people you already know are on the social web and get connected to them. It's such a key, important part about getting to that next step of becoming an active user.
So it's a mix, if you like, of needing to specify this mechanism, but also needing all the social not constraints, or all the things you have to consider, like consent, privacy, etc.
Absolutely.
Fascinating.
It's fun. It's interesting stuff, so there is not that kind of growth mentality a lot in the individual software packages that make up the social networks. There is obviously at Meta, at Flipboard, at Automatic, they think about growth. But for Mastodon or some of the smaller, that's just has not been a priority for them. So being able to say hey, we'd like more people to have this great experience. Let's figure out ways to improve it to keep them around. Yeah.
Another advantage then in having big commercial players behind the Social Web Foundation is that commercial organizations think about growth, and therefore they have, if you like, an imperative to be easier, be more inclusive, be more open, but easier to onboard. And if they're working with you, that then cascades, for want of a better word, across the whole, and I hate to use the word ecosystem, but I'm going to use the word
Ecosystem's
ecosystem.
fine. I love it because we have like, in an ecosystem in which there's a real variety of different kinds of creatures, different kinds of characters and players in this space. From one side where we've got like fire breathing open source free software folks to like the other side where we've got product managers in Silicon Valley, right? And everywhere in between. And I think it's really cool that we've got a lot of different stakeholders in this in the space of the social web. So I guess my the big thing that we want to make sure of is that when people are interested in this space, they know how to get started, right? Like if this is something that they want to do. And I think what's surprising for a lot of people is they may already have an account that is like, and we call it Fediverse enabled or social web enabled, and they just haven't actually turned it on, right? So if you've got an Instagram account, you can automatically get a Meta Threads account, and with Meta Threads, you can connect to the Fediverse, right? So that's a really easy step that already hundreds of millions of people already have those accounts set up. But if you've got a WordPress blog or you use Flipboard already, you also have access to these systems already existing. So I think that part of the work that we're trying to do at the Social Web Foundation is like let people know the platforms are coming to the social web. You can get ahead of them and get your Mastodon account, or you could use a service that already has it involved. So we also, I know I'm not plugging Vivaldi just because we're connected.
It's fine. You can plug Vivaldi.
Absolutely. So like every Vivaldi user has access to Vivaldi.net, which is a Fediverse enabled platform, right? And that's just amazing. Comes with, once you're in the ecosystem, you've got these services already built in, and you don't have to start anything.
Yeah, I mean, the Mastodon instance was before my time on the payroll, but I know the people involved, and it was just a no-brainer because Vivaldi, wants a better web, and a federation of social networks that's not controlled by one silo or gatekeeper, no matter how benevolent he or she might be, is obviously to us a better web. I mean, as you know, I'm English and I'm a middle-aged man, and therefore I haven't had an emotion since 1983. But I will tell everybody that this is my excited face. I'm genuinely excited about this because it does feel like the beginning of the web, when fire-breathing open source zealots had to sit down with shiny suited, brill-creamed haired Silicon Valley product managers, and get shit done. And by God, they did get shit done. We've got the web. This is possible. We've seen it happen. It can happen again.
Yeah. So one of the things that is really, interesting about this space is that there are these like different groups of folks. I've got a single person Mastodon, not single person. I set it up for my family. So me, my wife, my kids, we have that. We use that for sharing photos. We share it with my family, my more extended family. And it's a great mechanism, right? And so, we are a tiny player on this social web compared to 200 million people at Threads. And yet we have just as much of a voice, right? We are just as much of a part of this system as if we were, a huge company. And I think that that's a really nice part, is that we get to set our own rules. Nobody gets to tell us how it works. Well, okay, I'm the dad, so I kind of get to tell everybody how it works, but mostly people have a say in how it works. And I think that that's a really important part of a equitable system, I don't have to be in charge of the entire social web in order to be in charge of my part of the social web, right? And that's the nice thing for me.
And that's a great thing about the social web. By the way, am I supposed to call it social web rather than Fediverse? Are the two
You know,
terms interchangeable?
I use them interchangeably, right? There are some people who will tell you like one is very specific, like they'll apply social web to like social networks from like the early 2000s. And I'm like, look, this is what the social web is in 2024. You can define it however you want from like back in the ancient days, but now the social web means ActivityPub enabled systems. Some people call it the Fediverse. Some people call it Fedi. I'm perfectly fine with anything. We use Social Web Foundation just because it's a clearer term, I think, for a lot of people, and they understand that the web. They understand the idea of the document web or the application web, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can extend that to the social web.
Oh, I think it's a good term. You know, if I'm quite geeky, but when I first heard the word Fediverse, I thought, whereas social web, if somebody says, yeah, it's about social networks on the web, you go, yeah, makes sense. You know, it does what it says on the tin, as the Ron Seal advert says.
Yes, indeed. But also those goofy names, they like work, right? Like we talk about blogs and wikis and this and that, right?
Yeah, true.
Tweets and Twitter, right? It's like silly names are valuable. So I'll switch them back and forth. I'll say Fediverse or I'll say social web in the same sentence, right? And I think it's fine. But I know that like a Fediverse is a very special word to a lot of people who've been around for a while, and I think like giving that some respect is important too.
Agreed. Very quickly, because we're nearly at the top of the hour. What's next? What's top of your to-do list? Are you able to share that with us? What should we be looking out for in the imminent future?
So let me kind of go out. Start with me, and I'll work my way out. Right.
For sure.
So most recently, I've published a book with O'Reilly Media called ActivityPub: Programming for the Social Web. It's a book for software developers. So people who are into software, into building things, I think is a great place for folks to start. So it's from O'Reilly, which is known for their animals on the cover. And I highly recommend it for people who want to get started thinking about ActivityPub for their software. For the Social Web Foundation, we have a few big projects that we're working on right now. One is, you mentioned the EU. We're doing an analysis of the protocol for compatibility with the GDPR, which is the EU privacy regulations, to make sure that organizations that implement ActivityPub aren't accidentally stepping out over the lines of GDPR. How to do it in a way that's GDPR aware. So that's number one. We're doing some other work on enabling different kinds of content. So we're especially interested in we call it long form content, but like article length texts, like magazine articles, blog posts, because we want to not just have that micro blogging, single paragraph stuff, but can you read a full article within your Mastodon system or elsewhere, right? And we want to be able to make that a really nice experience. We are working on, let me see, I've got a couple of others top of mind. One is a landing page. So we want to make it so that if you are interested in the Fediverse, interested in the social web, we just have one place that you can share what is the Fediverse, and it explains it and gives you next steps. And then lastly, let me see, there's one more I have. End-to-end encryption, right?
Nice.
So ActivityPub is encrypted on the fly. So someone someone looking at your service from outside can't see your stuff. But when you store stuff on your service provider's disks in the cloud, that's stored in the clear. And so we want to make it so it's encrypted when it's on the service provider's network, so that you can talk about things with your friends and not worry about whether, your service provider is reading your messages or whatever, or, targeting ads towards you because of your messages. So we're trying to take that messaging aspect, which has become the default standard for most social networks, and bring it to ActivityPub so it works between social networks.
Interesting. So you can't target ads based upon the content of the message, which is nice. Does that inhibit a potential advertising supported model, or?
If you can't get good advertising focus out of my public posts and things that I already follow, I think that it's probably okay to focus your advertising model just on people's public posts, on their message to mom or whatever, right? So
gotcha. Encrypts private messages.
Encrypts private messages is for the stuff that you're sending directly to somebody else. DMs.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. And then I will go out one more, which is W3C is working on things like data portability. The work that we're doing on end-to-end encryption is also working with the W3C, and working on a next backwards compatible version of ActivityPub, kind of incorporating some of the things that we've learned in the last 5 years, and making it bigger and better. So that's, those are the things that are happening right now. I expect to see even more cool ActivityPub implementations over the next year. Hopefully next time I'm on For a Better Web, I can tell you about even more companies that have implemented the standard.
Well, I was just going to say, it would be really nice to have you back in a few months and discuss how it's gone on, because that to-do list is going to take you to at least next Thursday.
Absolutely. Maybe even through the weekend. Yeah, let's hope.
Don't work the weekends, mate. It's a mug's game. No, but that's really fascinating. Thank you, Evan. Folks at home or listening in or on the train or wherever you are, this is Evan Prodromo of the Social Web Foundation. I'm going to buy his book because I don't know it nearly enough about the tech that underlies this stuff, and I'm geeky enough that I want to. And I do like a nice O'Reilly book. What animal's on your cover?
What a good question. It's a Nande conure, which I had never heard of before. So you don't get to choose your animal. They assign an animal to you. Nande conure is a parrot that lives in South America and has very interesting nesting structure, which is that they nest in individual trees in their family units and kind of raise there, but they come together for flocking, right?
How appropriate.
Absolutely. So they're in full control of their own little nest, but when it's time to connect, they're able to do it in a larger way. And I was like, oh, wow, you guys really nailed it.
That's amazing.
I was like, wow, this is a good one. Yeah. So Nande conure. Yeah. So it's a beautiful green parrot. You can't miss it.
Well, you've sold one copy today at least. And
there we go.
Hopefully when this goes out, which shouldn't be too long, you'll be outselling Harry Potter.
Yeah. Can I also, while I'm plugging, just say socialwebfoundation.org. We have a big link at the top about what is the Fediverse. If you're interested in this, it has. We have a page with lots of links explaining how the Fediverse works and explaining how to get started. So good ways to get going.
And we'll put that link in the show notes when it goes on the website. If you didn't catch it, listeners. Evan, thank you so much for fighting for a better web. We wish you all the best with this endeavor. As you know, at Vivaldi, we're great fans of the Fediverse, of the social web. So, and I personally am. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for what you're doing. And we hope to see you again and hear lots of success stories.
Thank you so much for the chance. I really have enjoyed it.
Oh, and a belated happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
21 again.
21 again.
Thanks, Evan. See ya.
Thanks. Bye-bye.